I want to give you a couple tips, things that I think are crucial and that will really help your mixes. The first thing I'm going to go into is high pass and low pass filters. If you're not using high pass and low pass filters in your mix, then you're probably getting quite a bit of noise. This is an amazing way to clean up your low end and your high end. So of course, high pass filters let high things pass and cut out the lows. So that's how you're going to clean up your low end. And low pass filters cut out the high end and let the low end pass, and that's how you clean up your high end. This is really great when you're trying to make room for either your bass guitar or your kick. So typically things like guitars and vocals will always get a low pass filter for me. While there's a lot of low end information in this guitar, let's listen. Let's turn on the EQ. And if you look, I'm low cutting it around 160. Cutting all of that information out. And I'm high passing it around 8,000. Why would I do that? To have room for the bass guitar. Let's bring in the bass. Now the bass fills up all that space that we cut out of the guitar. Without that, they're going to be fighting each other. Especially when the drums get involved. I've decided to use high pass filters on these guitars. They have just a bit too much crunch and crackle in the high end, and it's really not necessary. So they have a much warmer tone now. And while I don't have a low pass filter on these right now, I do on the bus I'm sending them to. And a great practice whenever you're applying a low pass or a high pass filter, so just put one in and move it until you hear a difference. If you don't hear a difference, then that information doesn't need to be there. That sounds pretty good to me. A lot of this information on the low end is just rumble. The key idea is to just find the frequencies that are most important and focus on those. And again with the vocals, the most important frequencies are between 400 and 2000. So we'll roll a bunch of that out just to create more room for the bass and the kick. And that'll sit much nicer with the bass. In the end, you just have a much cleaner mix. Now, if you notice, I have this notch at 100, and that brings me to my next tip, carving out space. So I've gone into the kick drum, and I figured out the kick drum sits somewhere around 60 to 100, that's the peak. Well, what I've decided to do is I'm going to boost it at 100 and take out below that a bit, and then I'm going to cut out that space inside of the bass guitar so that the kick can punch through better. And then maybe I'll boost the low end on the bass, so they're working together. Since I'm using Neutron, it has this great feature called masking, where I can take a look at the other instances So here I see the kick drum, and where it's flashing, the bass guitar is covering up some of the kick drum. So maybe if I brought that back down, that's a better sound. You can both hear clearly the bass guitar and the kick drum. Now we can move the kick drum around by tuning it, but in this case, I like the way it sounds. Another example of interlocking or creating space is, see here, I've dipped around 400 on my vocal bus to create room for the guitar, but I've done the same thing around 600 on the guitar bus to create room for the vocals. That way they're both giving a little bit of their space to allow each other to come forward more fully. Now the last thing I want to talk about is texture. If you like to use drum samples like I do, and trust me, when it comes to mixing, sometimes you even have to use drum samples after you've recorded a live band. But you don't want those samples to get stale. The same sound over and over again. So I try to use plugins to add some variation, like this vinyl plugin, which is free from Isotope. You can download it on their website. It adds a bit of warble, simulating a vinyl record. So it adds some inconsistency to the hit. Each hit's a bit different, like a human player. And then on this one, I've added the new Arturia tape delay, but just in a subtle way. I have it sitting behind the main hit, and then I have an LFO with a sample and hold, adding some randomness to the rate. So each echo is different as well. And in the end, this just adds more of a human feel. You can also change texture using volume automation. Just take a part and change its volume slightly over time to simulate the way a player plays differently over time. So to recap, the 3 tips are to use high pass and low pass filters, create complementing space using EQs, and to add texture to tracks to make them more interesting.